Welcome to Karma Chronicles. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin.
I used to love the sound of the doorbell ringing. When Brian and I first got married, it was a sign of visitors, of laughter, of life outside of the bubble we'd built. But lately, every time that doorbell rang, a pit grew in my stomach. Not because of the visitor, but because I knew who it would be. Kelly, Brian's younger sister. Kelly, 22, with her bright eyes and air of entitlement, had a way of barging into our home without warning, demanding attention like it was her birthright. She'd stroll in, dropping her purse like she owned the place, and somehow expect to be catered to without saying so much as a thank you. At first, I tried to be welcoming. It was important to Brian. But over the past year, something had shifted. Brian had changed. He wasn't the man who used to surprise me with flowers, who saw me as an equal. Instead, I saw him trying to make excuses for Kelly's behavior, even defending her when I called her out for being rude or ungrateful. "Can you just let her stay for one more hour?" he'd ask. "She's my sister, Claire." And I'd nod, trying to keep my voice calm, even though inside I was screaming. It wasn't that I didn't want Kelly around, but it was the way she treated me as if I were invisible. And Brian, well, he'd just turn a blind eye, as if it was me, not his sister, who was the problem. I tried to ignore the growing resentment. I told myself it was just a phase, but every unannounced visit, every ungrateful glance from Kelly, every time Brian acted like her needs came before mine, made it harder to pretend. The more I thought about it, the more the silence between Brian and me grew, and I hated it. I hated feeling like I was losing myself in a house that was supposed to be my home. I could feel the tension rising the moment Brian asked me to buy the cake. Kelly had decided, on a whim, that she needed one tonight. Never mind, it was already past 9. Brian, sitting on the couch, eyes glued to the TV, barely glanced at me when he said, "Just go grab it. Kelly wants it now." I tried to keep my voice steady. "It's late, Brian. Are you sure she needs it right this second?" But Kelly, her voice sweet and sharp like she was used to getting what she wanted, cut in. "Yes, Claire. I've been craving it all day. Could you get me one, please?" The way she said please was barely a plea, more like an order wrapped in sugar. My jaw tightened, but I bit back the words that were starting to rise in my throat. I wasn't going to snap in front of Luke, not yet. Brian gave me that look, the one he always had when he was annoyed, but didn't want to admit it. "What's the big deal? Just get the cake. It'll take 10 minutes? I stood there, my heart heavy with resentment, but nodded. Fine. Luke was playing with his toys in the living room, oblivious to the tension between his dad and me. I tried to force a smile as I called him over. "Hey, buddy, let's go get that cake for Aunt Kelly, okay?" Luke's face lit up like I'd promised him a trip to Disneyland. "Cake? Yay!" He cheered, running to grab his little jacket. I didn't have the heart to tell him I didn't want to go, didn't want to leave, didn't want to make yet another sacrifice for someone who didn't appreciate it. We walked to the bakery, the cool night air biting at my skin. As we strolled down the sidewalk, Luke chattered on about his favorite cakes, the ones with chocolate frosting and bright sprinkles. For a moment, I forgot about everything. His excitement, his innocence, it made me remember who I was, before the endless demands, before the bitterness that was slowly sinking into my bones. I laughed when he told me that he'd like to have a super-duper cake for his next birthday, just like the one he had last year. I pushed the weight of the situation down, buried it under Luke's joy. Maybe this would be okay. Maybe if I just kept my mouth shut, if I played along, I could make it through tonight without cracking. But as soon as we got back to the house, all that fragile calm shattered. Brian and Kelly were sitting at the kitchen table, talking like they were the only two people in the room. They didn't even notice us walk in. I stood there in the doorway, my arms full of boxes, trying not to snap. I could feel the air between us thickening. I placed the cakes on the counter, Luke tugging at my sleeve, excited to show off the one he'd picked, the one with the rainbow icing, just like he'd wanted. Brian looked at it, then at Kelly, and without even a second's hesitation, he pushed Luke's cake aside, scooting it toward Kelly. "Kelly, you'll like this one better, trust me," he said, voice casual, like there wasn't a child standing there whose feelings were getting crushed in real time. Luke's face fell. But I wanted that one." His small voice cracked with disappointment. I saw red. It was like the whole room spun, and all I could focus on was Brian, standing there like he hadn't just dismissed our son's wishes for the sake of his sister's fleeting desire. My voice shook, but I didn't care anymore. "Brian, are you serious?" Luke picked that cake out. "He's 5 years old. Can't you just let him have it? Brian barely looked at me. His attention was still on Kelly, who was already halfway through her slice, oblivious to the wreckage she'd caused. Claire, it's not a big deal, Brian said, his tone dismissive. Kelly's been asking for this cake for hours. You can't just expect me to ignore her, can you? I didn't know how to respond. My throat closed up. But I wasn't going to let it go. Not this time, not anymore. I looked down at Luke, his eyes wide and glassy. He's your son, Brian. What about him? What about what he wants? Brian's jaw tightened, his eyes darkening, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the man I used to know. The one who could shut me down with just a glance. You're overreacting, he snapped, his voice low. It's just cake. He'll get over it. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, pushing out everything else. All the hurt, the isolation, the quiet resentment that had built over months, years, maybe, came spilling out. No, I said, stepping closer, my voice sharp, cutting through the thick air between us. No, Brian. It's not just about the cake. It's about you never putting our son first. It's about you letting your sister walk all over me and then blaming me when I'm fed up with it. He looked at me, and I could see the irritation in his eyes. You're being unreasonable? Unreasonable? I laughed bitterly. I'm the one who's unreasonable. You're the one who doesn't give a damn about anyone but yourself and Kelly. I'm done pretending it's okay. Luke sniffled next to me, and I knelt down to hug him, trying to hold back the tears that were threatening to come. My little boy didn't deserve any of this. Can you just stop, Brian? I pleaded. Just stop treating me like I'm invisible. Stop making me feel like I'm the problem here. But Brian didn't listen. He just turned away, muttering something under his breath, while I held Luke tight, the weight of the moment pressing down on me harder than anything. I stood there, still holding Luke, my arms wrapped around him like a shield. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. Brian's dismissive silence was louder than any argument we'd had in years. I could feel the weight of the cold air between us, the space he had put between us for so long, and I couldn't stand it anymore. I'm done, Brian, I said, my voice shaky but firm. I'm done letting you treat me like this. You always put her first. Always. And I'm sick of it. Our son is right here, and you can't even show him basic respect. Brian shifted uncomfortably, as if he hadn't expected me to stand up for myself. His eyes flickered with something, anger, maybe guilt, but he quickly masked it with that familiar, apathetic mask of his. Jesus, Claire, you're overreacting. It's just a cake. You're acting like I'm choosing Kelly over Luke. Not just the cake, Brian, I snapped. You've been choosing her over me and Luke for months. Every time she calls, every time she walks in the door, you drop everything. I've had enough. I'm the one taking care of everything around here. Our home, our son, everything. And you don't even notice. You don't care. Brian's expression hardened. He stood up, his voice growing cold. So what? You're just going to throw a tantrum because I didn't pick the right cake for Luke? You really think it's that big of a deal? My blood boiled. You're missing the point. You've been putting her ahead of us, your family, for so long, I can't even remember when it started. You've been neglecting me emotionally, and now you're showing Luke that he doesn't matter either. But he needs to see you care about him more than about whatever Kelly wants. I looked down at Luke, still clutching me, his small hands clutching the sleeve of my shirt. His innocent face was so full of confusion. And then, in the quiet of the moment, he spoke. Mom, can I have the cake? The one with the rainbow? His voice was so small, so hopeful. Brian looked at him, and I saw the flicker of irritation. He barely even glanced at Luke before dismissing him. Not now, buddy. I told you it's not that big of a deal. I couldn't hold back anymore. It was like something snapped inside of me. How could he be so callous? How could he brush Luke off like that, just like he'd been brushing me off for months? I grabbed Luke, lifting him in my arms, suddenly feeling like I had to protect him from everything in that moment. You know what, Brian? Forget it. I'm done. I'm not going to let you do this to him. I'm not going to let you make him feel like he doesn't matter just because you're too wrapped up in your sister. I stormed out of the room, Luke still in my arms, his little body trembling with a mix of confusion and fear. I walked straight to his room, shutting the door behind us, trying to catch my breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. Luke climbed into his bed, curling up under the covers, and I sat beside him, brushing my hand through his messy hair. He looked up at me with wide, questioning eyes, and it almost broke me. Mom, why are you and Daddy yelling? His voice cracked with the simple innocence of a child who couldn't understand the complexity of what was happening. I took a deep breath, trying not to cry in front of him. "It's okay, sweetie. Sometimes grown-ups fight, but it's not your fault, okay?" Luke nodded slowly, still unsure, and I kissed his forehead, wishing I could shield him from all of this. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep him in the dark forever. He was already starting to feel the cracks in our family. The silence stretched between us. I could hear Brian moving around downstairs, probably pacing, probably trying to figure out how to fix this. But I wasn't sure anymore if I wanted to fix it. I wasn't sure if I could. The hours passed, but it didn't feel like time moved at all. When Brian finally came into the room, he was quieter than before. But I could see right through his apology. It wasn't real. It wasn't sincere. It was just a way for him to ease his guilt and get things back to normal. The same toxic normal I'd been living with for too long. "I'm sorry," he said, standing in the doorway. "I didn't mean for it to get this bad. I'm just frustrated, Claire." I didn't say anything. I didn't want to. What was there to say? I'd heard his apologies before, and they always felt like empty promises. He stood there for a moment, waiting for me to respond, but I couldn't look at him. I couldn't look at the man I used to love, the man who had become a stranger to me. Brian left the room quietly, but the damage was done. I sat in the dark, the weight of the evening pressing on me. The silence between us felt heavier than it ever had before. And as I listened to Luke's soft breathing, I knew with painful clarity that I couldn't keep living like this. The night ended, not with a resolution, but with an empty, suffocating silence. And for the first time in years, I wasn't sure if I could fix it. I woke up to the smell of pancakes burning, my eyes still swollen from crying. The weight of last night's fight pressed heavy on me, and I felt like I hadn't slept at all. But I dragged myself out of bed, knowing I needed to make breakfast for Luke. He deserved something normal today, something that wasn't soaked in the tension I felt between Brian and me. I heard Luke's voice from the hallway, followed by a soft sob. I froze, my hand still gripping the spatula, heart pounding. I didn't have to think twice. I dropped the spatula and rushed toward his room, my breath coming faster. When I opened the door, I saw him sitting on the floor, his small hands clutching a broken piggy bank. It was the one my father had given him for his last birthday. It had been his favorite, a little ceramic dinosaur with a shiny green glaze. Now it lay in pieces, scattered across the floor. And worse, there was no money. The small pile of change Luke had worked so hard to save, all gone. I knelt beside him, trying to hold back the panic rising in my chest. "Luke, honey, what happened?" His face was red from crying, his little lip trembling. "Mom, I don't know. The piggy bank? It's broken. All my money's gone. Where did it go?" I could feel my stomach twist into knots, but I fought to keep my voice steady. I didn't want him to see me lose control. "It's okay, baby. We'll figure it out, all right?" But I already knew who had taken it. I just didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to have to confront Brian about this, not after last night. But there was no denying the truth. Not anymore. I heard Brian moving around downstairs. I stood up, my hands shaking as I wiped the tears from Luke's face. I could feel the anger building, but I kept it in check, telling myself to wait. Just wait. I walked downstairs to find Brian in the kitchen, still in his boxers, scrolling through his phone like everything was fine. He didn't even notice me standing there at first. "Brian," I said, my voice cold but controlled, "where's the money that Luke saved in his piggy bank?" He glanced up at me, his eyes narrowing, before he let out a long sigh. "Oh yeah, about that. Kelly needed some money this morning, so I gave it to her." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "You gave it to her?" "Brian, that was Luke's money. That wasn't hers to take. Why would you just give it to her like that?" He shrugged like it was nothing. "She needed it. She was short, and I couldn't say no. She's family, Claire." "Family." My voice caught in my throat. "Our son is family too, Brian. You can't keep doing this. Putting Kelly's needs before Luke's? You just took his money without even asking me, without even telling him what was going on. What the hell is wrong with you?" Brian's eyes flickered with irritation, but there was no apology in his voice. "Look, I didn't think it was a big deal. Kelly's struggling right now. She needed help, and Luke's not going to miss the money. It's just change." Just change? I could feel my anger rising, and I couldn't stop it anymore. It wasn't just change, it was his money, and you've been treating him like he's invisible. First the cake, and now this. Do you even care about him anymore? Brian's face hardened. You're blowing this way out of proportion. It's just money, Claire. I didn't think you'd make a big deal out of it. I stepped closer, my voice barely above a whisper, but full of venom. That's the problem, Brian. You never think about anyone but Kelly. You've been choosing her over Luke and me for months now. Months. And every time I try to talk to you about it, you shut me down. You act like I'm the one with the problem. But it's you. You're the problem. You've been neglecting your own family for her. Brian looked at me, his face unreadable, like I was speaking another language. I'm tired of hearing about how I'm such a terrible husband. You know what, Claire? Maybe if you weren't so fixated on every little thing I do, I wouldn't have to deal with this crap. Every little thing? My chest tightened with a sharp burst of pain. This isn't about little things, Brian. This is about you treating us like we don't matter. You don't get to pick and choose when you want to be a good father or a good husband. And you sure as hell don't get to decide that Kelly's needs are more important than Luke's. His eyes flashed with anger. So what do you want me to do, Claire? You want me to choose? To choose between you and my sister? Well, I'm sorry, but I'm not doing that. I felt something break inside me. Maybe it had already broken long before this, but now I could see it, feel it in every fiber of my being. The man I had married, the man I thought I could trust, the man I had once loved, wasn't here anymore. And he hadn't been for a long time. Luke's voice, small and fragile, called from the doorway. Mom? He was standing there, his eyes wide, his little body trembling with uncertainty. Why are you and Dad yelling? I felt my heart crack. I couldn't let him see this anymore. I couldn't let him witness this coldness, this neglect that had taken over our home. I turned back to Brian, but I couldn't speak anymore. There was nothing left to say. I walked over to Luke, scooping him into my arms, trying to hold it together. It's okay, baby. I'm sorry we're yelling. You don't need to worry about this. But the truth was, I couldn't protect him from it anymore. Not from Brian, not from what was happening to us. I carried Luke back to his room, the weight of everything pressing down on me, suffocating me. This wasn't a marriage anymore. This was just a series of broken moments, held together by nothing but stubbornness and pride. As I sat down on his bed, Luke curled up in my arms, I realized with devastating clarity, this wasn't just a rough patch. This was the end. I stood in Luke's room, my hands trembling as I picked up the clothes I'd set out for him. I wasn't sure what exactly I was doing or where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay here anymore. Not after what happened with the piggy bank. Not after everything that had been building between Brian and me for so long. I wasn't sure when I'd stopped feeling like his wife and started feeling like a ghost in my own home, but I couldn't ignore it any longer. I grabbed my phone, dialed my mom's number, and waited, the seconds stretching long in the silence. When she picked up, her voice was warm, familiar, but there was a sharpness to it that I hadn't expected. Claire, is everything okay? You sound off. I couldn't hold it in. Mom, I don't know what to do. I don't think I can stay here anymore. I don't think I can stay with Brian. It's not just about last night, it's everything. I feel like I'm drowning. And Luke? I choked on the words. I can't let him grow up in this. I can't let him think this is normal. My mom was silent for a moment, but I could feel her heart break for me over the phone. I know, sweetheart. You don't have to explain. Just come home. Come stay with us. I'll call your dad. We'll figure it out. You're not alone in this. Her words hit me like a wave of relief and fear all at once. For so long, I'd been trying to convince myself that I could fix everything, that I could make it work for Luke's sake, but I couldn't, and I wasn't going to. I'll pack our things and leave, I said, my voice steady now, even if my heart wasn't. I need to protect him, Mom. I need to get away from Brian. I can't live like this anymore. Of course, we'll be waiting for you. Take care of yourself, you and Luke. I hung up the phone, and for a moment, I just stood there, letting the weight of the decision sink in. It was the right choice. It had to be. But it didn't make it any easier. I walked to the closet, starting with Luke's things. A few pairs of clothes, his favorite dinosaur shirt, his shoes. He didn't need to understand what was happening, not yet. But I was going to protect him from it. I shoved the clothes into a bag, my mind moving faster than my hands could keep up. I heard Kelly's voice outside the window, laughing with Brian in the yard. That sense of unease that had been growing in me flared again. I hadn't heard her leave this morning. She'd been here, and now I wondered, did she have anything to do with Luke's piggy bank being broken? It was stupid, but the thought gnawed at me. I couldn't prove it, but it felt like everything was connected. Her constant presence, her ability to get what she wanted, even at Luke's expense. I didn't put it past her. I pushed the thought away, focusing on the task at hand. I couldn't afford to get distracted. I had to leave. I grabbed a few things for myself, clothes, my toothbrush, my phone charger, and threw them into a duffel bag. The house felt cold, empty, even though it was full of things. Full of memories I didn't want to remember. I could hear Kelly's laughter again, drifting through the open window, her voice grating against the silence in my chest. I looked at the front door, wondering if Brian would come in and stop me, if he would try to apologize again. But I couldn't wait for that. I couldn't wait for him to make excuses, to say the things that always sounded good at the time but never changed anything. I needed out. I walked down the stairs as quietly as I could, Luke in tow, his little hand holding mine. He didn't ask any questions. He was used to the quiet moments, the ones where I didn't have the answers, where he was forced to pick up on the tension in the room. I opened the door slowly, trying not to make any noise, not to let anyone know I was leaving. I didn't know how Brian would react, but I didn't want to find out. I didn't want to see him try to guilt me into staying or make promises he couldn't keep. I didn't want to be here anymore. I just wanted to get out. I looked over my shoulder one last time, my heart racing. The house we had built, the life I had tried so hard to hold together. None of it mattered now. The only thing that mattered was getting Luke out of this place, away from Brian, away from Kelly. I stepped outside, my hand still holding Luke's, and closed the door behind me. Quietly, I didn't look back. We got into the car, and I started the engine. The familiar hum of the car seemed to wash over me, soothing my nerves just a little. I was doing the right thing. I had to believe that. As we drove away from the house, I felt a weight lift, just a little. But I also knew that the hardest part was still ahead of me. I had no idea what the future held, but I couldn't stay in that toxic environment any longer. The only thing I was certain of was that I was leaving behind a marriage that had drained me emotionally and mentally. I wasn't sure when I'd let myself go, when I'd stopped being the woman I wanted to be. But I knew that this was my chance to start again. For Luke, for me. The drive to my parents' house felt long, but not in the way I had expected. I had thought I'd be counting every mile, waiting for the inevitable guilt to hit. Instead, I found myself gripping the steering wheel, the hum of the engine oddly comforting. Luke had fallen asleep in the passenger seat, his face peaceful for once, and I tried to let myself feel the same sense of peace. But I couldn't. The tightness in my chest wouldn't let me relax. When I finally pulled into my parents' driveway, it was like a weight I didn't even realize I'd been carrying dropped. The house looked the same, just as I remembered it. The rose bushes by the front door were blooming, and the porch light was on, like it had been waiting for us. I felt an odd mix of relief and guilt. Relief that we were finally somewhere safe, but guilt because I knew I was walking away from something that had once meant everything to me. I grabbed the bag of clothes and my purse from the back seat, then walked around to Luke's side to wake him gently. His little eyes fluttered open, and he yawned, rubbing his face with the back of his hand. "We're here, sweetie," I whispered, trying to smile for him. His face brightened, a small spark of excitement showing through the fog of sleep. "Grandma and Grandpa's?" "Yep, Grandma and Grandpa's," I said, picking him up and holding him close for a moment before we headed inside. My mom was waiting at the door, her arms open wide before I could even knock. She pulled me into a tight hug, and I almost broke down then and there. I didn't realize how much I needed this. The simple comfort of being held, not judged, just loved. "You're safe now," she murmured into my hair. I nodded, trying to hold it together for Luke, but it was hard. I wanted to let go, to cry until I had nothing left, but I couldn't do that. Not yet. My dad appeared in the doorway, and his expression softened when he saw us. He looked at me like he was already ready to do whatever it took to protect us. "Come in," my mom said, stepping aside, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel so alone. Luke immediately ran over to the toys in the corner, and my mom took me by the arm, guiding me toward the kitchen. I could feel the questions in her silence, but she didn't ask them yet, not until I was ready. I sat down at the table, feeling the heaviness of the situation settle on me like a blanket. My mom poured me a cup of tea, and we sat there in silence for a few moments. It wasn't awkward, just necessary. Finally, I took a deep breath and told her everything. About Brian's neglect, about Kelly's manipulative behavior, about the way I'd been ignored, dismissed, and made to feel like I didn't matter. I didn't leave anything out: the stolen money, the broken piggy bank. how Brian had put Kelly's needs above Luke's again and again until I couldn't take it anymore. My mom's face softened as I spoke, her eyes brimming with concern. But when I finished, her expression shifted. "That's so wrong, Claire," she said, her voice tight. "You and Luke don't deserve that." I nodded, wiping away a tear before it could fall. I know, but I didn't know how to get out. I didn't know how to stop pretending it would get better. My dad, who had been listening quietly from the other side of the room, leaned forward, his jaw clenched as he looked at me, and I could tell his anger was simmering just below the surface. "That son of a bitch," he muttered, more to himself than to me, his fists tightening. "How dare he treat you like that? He's supposed to be your partner. You don't deserve this, Claire." His anger made me feel both validated and sick. It was the same anger I had felt inside for so long, but now, hearing it from him, it hit differently. I hadn't been able to put words to it before. But now, in the safety of my parents' home, I could finally admit it. This wasn't just about me. It was about Luke, too. About the future I was willing to fight for. I looked at my mom, who squeezed my hand. "You need to take time for yourself, Claire. Focus on you and Luke. You don't have to figure it all out tonight, or even tomorrow. You've been through a lot." I nodded again, trying to let the weight of her words sink in. She was right. I didn't have to figure it all out right away. What mattered now was that we were safe, that Luke was safe. And then, in a moment of clarity, I realized something I hadn't been able to admit before. I was done trying to salvage my marriage. Brian had chosen his sister over me and Luke far too many times. And now, after everything that had happened, I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't keep making excuses for him. For Kelly, I had spent too long putting their needs before my own, before Luke's, and I wasn't doing that anymore. "I'm done, Mom," I whispered, almost to myself. "I'm done trying to make it work. It's over." My mom squeezed my hand tighter, nodding, her eyes filled with something soft and understanding. She didn't need to say anything more. I didn't need her to. She knew. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a flicker of hope. Not for the marriage I'd left behind, but for the life I was going to build now. For me and Luke. A life where we came first, where we were safe, where we were finally enough. It's strange how quickly you forget who you used to be when you're living in someone else's shadow. Before Brian, before Luke, I had a life I was proud of. I'd been a manager at a tech company, one of the only women in a leadership role, the youngest by far. I made good money, had a solid career, and felt like I was building something for myself. I was good at my job. I didn't need anyone to take care of me, but after Brian and I got married, I let go of all that. I decided I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. I wanted to be there for Luke, help him grow up with a full-time presence at home. But I never told Brian about the financial independence I had. I never told him how much money I'd saved before we got married. I didn't think it mattered at first, but now looking back, I wonder if that was one of my biggest mistakes. The more I thought about the way Brian had treated me, how he'd manipulated every situation to keep me in line, the more I started to see the pattern, the controlling behavior, the subtle ways he had started isolating me from my own life, from my own sense of security. It wasn't just emotional. There had been financial manipulation, too. He had always been the one to handle the bills, the expenses, the budgeting. I thought it was a partnership, but now I realized it was more about control. Brian didn't want me to have access to my own finances. He didn't want me to feel independent, to have a safety net in case things went wrong. And then there was Kelly. She had always been spoiled, always gotten whatever she wanted. And I'd let her walk all over me because I was trying to be the good wife, the good sister-in-law. But now it hit me like a ton of bricks. Brian and Kelly had been using my money. Not just the piggy bank, not just the small things that felt insignificant at the time, but something much bigger. I started to think about the accounts I'd opened when I was still working, the investments, the savings. Brian had always insisted on taking care of everything. He'd made me feel like I was doing the right thing by letting him, but I couldn't ignore the sinking feeling anymore. I was sure he had been siphoning money off for himself and for Kelly. There were purchases I couldn't explain, unexplained withdrawals. My name might have been on the accounts, but I had a sinking feeling that Brian had been quietly draining them, using what was mine without asking. The panic that crept in was overwhelming. I wasn't just angry. I was terrified. I had no idea how much he'd taken, how far back this had been going. I needed to protect myself. I needed to protect Luke. I went straight to the drawer in the kitchen where I kept all the paperwork. I rifled through the papers until I found what I was looking for, the account statements. There they were, exactly as I had feared. Several large transfers, some under my name, but others marked as joint withdrawals. It was too late for me to undo any of it now, but at least I knew what I was dealing with. I moved quickly, taking out all my important documents, my ID, the bank statements, copies of everything. I put them into a folder and shoved it into my bag. I wasn't taking any chances. I couldn't risk Brian getting his hands on them. I knew what I had to do next. I dialed my dad's lawyer, Greg. He'd been a close family friend for years, and even though I'd never asked for legal help before, I knew this was different. I needed advice, and fast. Claire, is everything okay? Greg's voice was calm, but I could hear the concern. I need your help, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I need to make sure I'm protected, legally, financially, and I need to talk about filing for divorce. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost feel him processing what I was saying, the weight of it. I understand. I'll help you through this, Claire, he said finally. I'll make sure your assets are protected and we'll talk about custody. Don't worry, we'll get you through this. I felt a wave of relief. I wasn't alone in this anymore. Not with Greg guiding me, not with my parents supporting me. I took a deep breath. I want to make sure Luke is safe. That's my priority. I want full custody. Greg's voice was steady, reassuring. We'll make sure that happens. But you have to be prepared, Claire. Brian won't go down easy. He'll fight you. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words settle into my chest. I wasn't sure if I was ready for the fight, but I knew it was coming, and I had no choice. I couldn't keep living like this. After I hung up with Greg, I sat for a few minutes in the quiet, the weight of everything settling over me. I could feel my heart beating in my chest, but there was something else there too. Resolve. A steady, undeniable feeling that I was doing the right thing. I was done trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed. I was done pretending that Brian was the man I had married. I was done with the gaslighting, the manipulation, and the emotional abuse. I was done putting my happiness and my son's well-being last. I looked at Luke, playing quietly in the other room, and I knew what I had to do. My focus was clear now. My priority was Luke, his happiness, his future. I didn't know what the road ahead would look like, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally taking control of my life again. And no matter what Brian did, I wouldn't let him take that away from me. I wasn't surprised when Brian showed up at my parents' house. I'd known it was only a matter of time, but that didn't make it any easier to see him standing in the doorway, his face twisted with desperation. Claire, he said, his voice tight, I need to talk to you. Please. I didn't move at first. I just stood there in the living room, feeling the heavy air between us. My mom and dad were in the other room, pretending to be busy, but I knew they were listening. I could see the worry in their eyes, the way they were bracing themselves. They knew what was coming, just like I did. What do you want, Brian? I finally asked, my voice calm but firm. I know I messed up, he said, stepping further into the room. I know I hurt you, but I swear I didn't mean it. I was just, I don't know, lost. But I want to fix this. I want us to be a family again. I didn't move. I didn't even flinch. I'd heard it all before. The promises, the apologies, the lies. He could beg, he could cry, but it wouldn't change anything. I can't live like this anymore, Brian, I said, keeping my voice steady. For me, for Luke, I can't keep pretending. I've tried so many times. But you're not the man I thought you were. You've been hurting us for too long, and I'm done. His face crumpled, and for a split second, I thought I saw a flicker of the man I used to love, but it was gone before I could even process it. Please, Claire, he whispered, his voice breaking. Don't leave me. Don't take Luke away. I can change. I'll do anything. Just don't leave. I shook my head slowly, my heart thudding in my chest, but I couldn't feel pity for him anymore. Not after everything he'd put me through. Not after everything he'd done to Luke. You don't get it, Brian, I said, my voice finally cracking, the words tasting bitter. I've been waiting for you to change for years. I've been waiting for you to choose me, to choose Luke, but you've never done it. You've never put us first, and I'm not going to keep living like this. I won't let Luke grow up thinking this is normal. Brian's face turned red, his eyes wild with panic. He took a step forward, his hands reaching out like he was trying to grab hold of something he couldn't control. Please, Claire, he begged, his voice raw. I love you. I love our family. You're everything to me. I can't lose you. Don't take everything from me. I took a deep breath, my chest tight. There was nothing left to say. I had made up my mind, but hearing him beg like that, it still hurt. It was a pain I hadn't expected. I wasn't sure what I had been hoping for when I walked away. Maybe I thought he'd fight for me in a way that mattered. But now, seeing him unravel, I realized it wasn't about me anymore. It was about the damage he'd caused, the life we couldn't go back to. I reached into my bag and pulled out the divorce papers, folding them open on the table between us. Brian's eyes flickered down to them, and for a moment, I saw his expression shift. The panic became something darker, something more desperate. No, he whispered, shaking his head. No, Claire, you can't. You can't do this. I already have, I said softly, my voice steady. It's too late, Brian. This is over. His face twisted in disbelief. Please, please don't do this. I can change. I will change. You're taking everything from me. I felt a flicker of sympathy, but it was quickly buried by the anger I still carried. You've already taken everything from me, I said, my voice low but firm. You've taken my trust, my peace, my ability to breathe without feeling like I'm walking on eggshells. You've taken my son's childhood. You've taken too much. Brian's face crumbled, and I could see the reality crashing down on him. He swayed slightly, his hands gripping the edge of the table like he might fall, and then, before I could stop him, he dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice choked. I'm sorry. I don't want to lose you. Please, don't leave me. I love you. I stared at him for a long moment, watching him break apart in front of me. For a brief second, I wondered if I could still love him, if I could still fix what had been broken. But I knew better. I had given him every chance, and every time, he had let me down. I'm not your savior anymore, Brian, I said quietly, my words carrying the weight of everything I had been holding in for years. You don't get to destroy me and expect me to stay. I can't fix you. I can't fix this. Brian was sobbing now, his face buried in his hands, but I didn't flinch. I didn't step forward to comfort him. I had learned too much to believe in empty words, too much to fall for the cycle of apologies. I took one last look at him, at the broken man who used to be my husband, and I turned to walk away. I didn't look back. I couldn't. As I stepped into the hallway, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. I was walking away from everything I had tried to build, from the life I had once dreamed of. But the truth was, I had already walked away a long time ago. This was just the final step. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I was finally free. And for the first time in a long time, I could breathe. Life after Brian felt like stepping out of a fog that had settled over me for years. I woke up each morning in my parents' house with a sense of clarity I hadn't known I'd been missing. The house was quieter, and for the first time in a long time, there was peace in the air. Luke had settled into our new routine, and it felt good to see him so carefree. He spent his days running around the backyard with my dad, helping him with little projects, while my mom would bake cookies in the kitchen. Simple, joyful things I had almost forgotten about. We spent our evenings reading books together or playing board games, things I used to do before the weight of my marriage had suffocated me. Luke's laughter was a balm to my soul, a reminder that despite everything that had gone wrong, we could still find happiness in the small moments. My parents were incredible. They didn't push me to talk if I didn't want to. But every time I glanced at them, I saw the quiet support in their eyes, the kind of love that didn't need words. My dad made sure I knew he had my back. My mom kept encouraging me to lean into this newfound independence, to embrace the freedom I'd earned, to find my own way. It wasn't easy, but I was starting to believe I could do it. I decided to return to work. It wasn't a huge step, but it felt like one of the most important things I could do for myself. I wasn't just someone's wife or mother anymore. I was Claire again, the woman who used to be confident in her own skin, who thrived in her career. I started working part-time at a marketing agency just a few days a week to ease back into it. But even that little bit of structure was enough to rebuild my confidence. Every meeting, every campaign I worked on, reminded me of the person I used to be, the person I could still be. And with every step I took, I felt more like myself, more like I was in control of my own future and not dictated by Brian's or Kelly's demands. Luke was thriving too. He found comfort in the routine. And when he wasn't playing with my parents, he and I would take trips to the park or go on nature walks, his little hand clutching mine as we explored the world around us. I could see the joy in his face, the peace that came from living in a stable home. Something I had promised him, something I was determined to give him every day. As I watched him grow more confident, more at ease, I realized I was too. I had given up so much of myself, so much of my independence for a life that didn't value me. But now, my future and Luke's was in my hands, and I wasn't going to waste a second of it. No more walking on eggshells, no more apologizing for things that weren't my fault. I was going to build a life where I was seen, where my needs mattered just as much as anyone else's. The path ahead wasn't perfect. There would be challenges, no doubt, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. I was free, and that was enough.